All right.
Wait, I thought the state of React Native was out. It's not.
Was
Wait,
out? What do you mean? Oh, the
I thought
state
that.
of the survey or whatever?
Yeah. Have they not released it yet?
Let me see here. I just need to post in
No,
the
they haven't.
Discord real quick as well. There we go. Wonder what the... It doesn't really do a little image preview, so
Oh, that's how it is.
it's weird.
Oh, yeah. I was hoping we were able to talk about the state of React Native, but it is not out yet.
Bummer.
It's a bummer.
I wonder how we can change the banner for... I guess we can't. Oh, well. It is what it is. I'll figure out StreamYard one day. But,
yeah.
So, firstly, I just wanted to know if I can merge the...
Oh, yeah. Let's get that doc stuff in.
Okay. What do you think of the overall structure relative to what it was? Better?
I think it's good. Yep. It's better.
Yeah. I have a lot of other plans for the documentation. And I think it'll be really nice when I'm finished. It's just difficult to figure out how to iteratively, right, piecemeal, get it in, because otherwise it would just be this project that we're working on for a while. And oh goodness, I accidentally deleted and then restored the branch. Okay, delete it again. I'm not used to like auto deletion, auto cleanup stuff. I am so used to having to do that stuff myself. But yeah, so the documentation is going to be really good. I thought about it for a while, and I actually think that the deployment, like multiple deployments for versions, is actually the better way to do it. And for a couple reasons. One being that that's the way Tailwind does it. It allows us to do a prefix, like a version prefix on the URL. So like v3.nativewind. And then just redirect to v4.nativewind or whatever the latest one is to the, the root, basically.
Yeah,
and you can
I'm
still
kind of happy
have
to do it just as a clean cut as well. Just to say, okay, if the old docs are here, the new docs are there, and so inside the docs folder, we could just create like a v3 folder, then a v4 folder, and just change the deployment, which folder it deploys from. Because at the moment, it's just going through Vercel and says that like deploys from this folder. We'll just change the path of that folder, and I think we just start up a new project for the new docs.
Cool. All right. So yeah, that's what I had in mind. I'm, as a core strategy of the docs rewrite, is just in general, whatever version you happen to be looking at, it should reflect like that version of the docs as well, right? So if it's like you're using V3 of Tailwind, then V4 docs should be roughly like looking like that in terms of structure, so you know where to go for things. Because as far as I understand, so this actually is relevant. I'm just going to show this comment real quick. Support for Tailwind version 4 is coming, and it will be reflected in version 5 of Nativewind. And the goal, if I'm not mistaken, Mark, is to have that out, within the next month or so. But
so a lot of it is timing as well. So we've talked about this before, but there's going to be a lot of major version bumps for everything. So this is a major version bump for Tailwind, for Reanimated to support the new beta of the new Reanimated coming out as well. We're going to require new architecture, new version, React 19, Hermes engine. we're just kind of getting the project ready for the future, and we just kind of want to like time this and have all the major version bumps in one go instead of like stringing it out over the next couple of releases. So we're trying to make this like a big cutoff release that kind of stabilizes it for the future.
Yeah. So with that in mind, then going back to the docs, version 4 of the Tailwind docs not only like style wise looks a bit different, but also structurally they've like condensed some like things from customization into core concepts and that kind of thing. And so what I'm going to be trying to do, and I think we should do this, I imagine it's already done, but like as much as possible, don't introduce new patterns, right? Like make it so that, like we were discussing before, Mark, the patterns that people are used to with respect to styling, once they jump into Nativewind, those patterns are still there. Obviously, that's not possible everywhere, but that should be true of the technical aspect of Nativewind and the documentation aspect. And so the structure of the documentation will reflect that insofar as one part of it is getting started, installation, editor setup, like that kind of thing. The next is, what even is this? What are the core concepts? How do you like move around in Nativewind and subsequently Tailwind? And then the last part, which is the bulk of the documentation to my knowledge, is what is the same and what is different, right? What are the platform differences or anything like this? Like those tables, right, that outline, here's how it works on web and here's how it works on mobile. If there are any differences, here's what we support, here's what we don't support.
Yeah. Going back to your earlier comment, so our docs have often tried to mirror what the Tailwind docs do in terms of like navigation and sections. We've tried to kind of like mirror so that if you're like reading this and then you wonder how it works from Nativewind, you can just go to the equivalent page. So our new docs need to match that navigational structure of the new version as well, just so that you have that similarity. And then normally we just have an extra section of like, this is the stuff that we've added or changed, or like, you know, like they have like a section, like we used to have a section like core concepts, and we would just add in a couple of extra pages there of the things that we did
that pertain to native or Nativewind itself.
Yeah, exactly.
I agree.
In terms of the setup, so this is like what I wanted to talk about a bit today, because now it's been announced officially on the Expo blog. So Expo, in collaboration with Bolt, has Expo apps now running inside StackBlitz,
which is great. And I think that's like an end-to-end thing. Do you just want to walk through like what's the problem and what's this solution or tool like powerful for?
So the best thing about this is now you don't need to have a local development environment to actually work on React Native. So before this existed, the environment was Expo Stack, which was a very small sandbox environment where you can download things and work, and it would connect to a remote server and show you Expo Go through that remote server. It was a little bit clunky if you just wanted to test it on your own devices, and Expo Stack actually worked a little bit differently to how it worked on your computer. So it didn't use Metro in the same way. There were weird differences between it.
Stack was really odd.
It was not a good long-term development. It was good to showcase ideas, but it wasn't an actual development environment. So the difference now with these new environments is that they are actually a full development environment. They are running Metro how you would run Metro. It's actually just running it locally inside your browser instead of your terminal. Everything is exactly the same, and you can just use the QR code inside the terminal, inside your browser, the browser terminal, to actually connect your phone, your version of Expo Go on your phone to actually preview from there. So it's just a better, more streamlined example.
So to that effect, and we'll get to the questions in the comments here in a second, but I just want to wrap this concept is a lot of the challenge and the confusion with respect to things like Expo Snack, which ties directly into Expo Go, right? Is what are the libraries included, right? And Expo Go being a horribly poorly named concept.
So just quickly, this won't fix that. This will still only support the native libraries inside Expo Go.
Right.
The difference is that it's a full development environment. So you could actually mirror that to a GitHub repo. Or like, for example, if we had like a repo of example code, you could actually just load that up inside the StackBlitz and run it yourself. Or if you're having problems with your project setup, you could actually just say, okay, here's the StackBlitz to my repo, and we can actually run your code without even having to download it or clone it. Or if you want project setup, you could actually just say fork this example, and it will create a new repo for you of that example. There's having to, like, our project setup could actually just be a button on the website that just says fork this getting started project. Cool, that's your setup.
In StackBlitz, though.
In StackBlitz. But we could have a link inside our docs saying, like, you can run all these instructions, or just click here to create a StackBlitz.
Yeah.
Test it, make sure that it's working properly, and then save that to GitHub.
Sure. And that's certainly cool. I defer to people to decide whether they want to switch their local editor to using StackBlitz on the web, but maybe just to play around. Yeah.
A docs thing, because we used to have snack examples in the docs, but they got removed for the current version. We no longer have them. And so this is a way for us to bring it back in a better way that helps people with troubleshooting more. Because by far the most common problem we have is people trying to get the project set up. And this means on literally every single page of the docs is a full working example project.
That's
where
great.
They can actually go in, see what the config files are, things like that. Or if they have a problem with something, they can actually just copy paste their config file into one of the examples to see, is this Nativewind? Is this their config? So it makes support and just the whole documentation journey a lot easier and to manage and things like that. We're hoping to reduce how many people stumble during the setup period.
And but then as an example, if we wanted a same kind of setup for Nativewind UI, given that that's outside of the scope of Expo Go, it wouldn't function. Like that would be a completely separate kind of solution. So for people.
Yeah. So the development environment runs inside your browser. It just runs Metro there. And it connects remotely to your phone. It can only use Expo Go because you can't download native code remotely onto your phone. That needs to be approved from an app store. So that's why you can still only just use the native apps or the native libraries that are available as part of Expo Go. Yeah. This isn't a replacement. Like, Expo still highly recommends you do a development build for your development. And Expo Go is just for quick demo showcasing, testing out ideas, things like this. Like, I want to see something in the docs. It's perfect for this. But it's not a replacement development environment. It's
sure.
Just
it's really I get it. I just wanted
for our use case. Yeah.
Right. And many others, like if so long as they fit within the confines of Expo Go, it should be able to fully sidestep like a very confusing aspect of that experience. So, okay, cool. Jumping into these questions really quick before we move forward. RSC support. I've seen that once before. We're pretty early on that, right? Like
that is coming. It will probably come in the next major version. It'll probably be on the last of features. I don't know if it'll be there on release, but probably maybe a minor afterwards. It's been pretty heavily used by Evan. Like all our demos with RFCs basically use Nativewind. Same with working with DOM components, because it's just easy to use the same styling between the two. So it is very heavily there. also geeky ants who do GlueStack are very heavily invested in RSCs as well. So this is a hugely requested feature for them. I believe they have some patches to kind of fix things up to get it working a little bit better that we'll be incorporating in.
Okay. And as far as React Native 0.76, I think the next version of Nativewind is targeted towards 0.77.
Yeah, so we're going to target 7.7 just because that requires React 19. And we'll be using the features of that. But in terms of box shadow, yeah, technically we could backport that to V4. We're just we've got a lot of work and capacity to work on at the moment. There is a PR that has it kind of working right now. It's just that a lot of libraries don't use the longhand form of box shadow, and they use like a shorthand version, and we have to parse that in slightly different ways, and that's just where the holdup is. There's some new stuff coming in the new version that makes that parsing a lot easier, so it might come in V5, unfortunately, but that will bring in all the new styling features. So box shadow is actually it's not like a new rule, it's actually part of filter, which is the new rule that's available in React Native 76. And filter isn't just box shadow, it's all the other filter properties that are available as well. We'd also like to support, it's currently experimental. I think we will just go out the door and just put a flag in the docs that it is experimental on the React Native side. This is for background image to support actually doing background gradients natively through React Native and not having to bring in like the expert library. The third-party library for it.
Yeah, I would hope then, or my aim will be, as the version 5 comes out, the docs that come out will also explain some of these concepts, like box shadow being under filter and how you're meant to use filter if it in any way differs from,
There's also there's a lot of things coming in V5 that are small things like this, but we're going to kind of put a bit more information in the docs that kind of explain them. There is some minor breaking changes, or big, I'm not too sure how they are, coming in V5 that we've talked about before. I'm not too sure if I've explained this before, but we've also going to have a breaking change about how transform properties work. Have I talked about this before?
I think you mentioned it last time, but it's probably worth going over again.
Okay. So the way we merge properties in Nativewind is going to change in the next major version. So currently we flatten all the styles into a single object, which is fine, but it maybe breaks how people expect React Native to work. Because React Native can accept an array of style objects or even like style functions. And when we flatten that array into a single object, we kind of break a couple of things that some people might care about. The big one is like functions stop becoming functions and they now become objects. So that functionality is just lost. And we also break the object identity. So if you needed to reference the identity of an object, when we flatten it, it becomes a new object and you lose that identity reference. So we're keeping the identity of objects. So instead of merging into a single object, we'll merge into an array of objects. But part of that merging object is also how the transform property will change. So transform is an unusual property in that it is an array of objects that have individual keys. Before, we used to actually individually merge those objects together. So if you did transform styles that only set translate X, and then you did translate styles that only set translate Y, we would actually do a transform that had an Y inside of it. We're actually going to change that so it more works like the web and how people would expect, where it would actually just have the most important value in it. So it would just be the transform with translate Y, because that transform would override the previous transform. When React Native flattens an array of styles, it doesn't deeply merge them. It's simply a shallow merge. So we're going to be mimicking that behavior as well.
So that would require people to like change up maybe potentially
some of their code and just how they do the transforms, making sure that they list out the full transform value instead of doing some things. This will only really be relevant if you're merging class names in inline styles together, where the inline style might completely override the class name. So you just have to do what we already recommend people do, which is actually explicitly state out all the styles. Like, just don't rely on like defaults occurring and stuff like that. Always put in all the styles for everything that you want. The reason I bring this up is because the filter property is going to work exactly the same. So filter is an array of objects of the different filters that you can apply on it, and it's going to merge the same way as well. So just kind of
okay, yeah, and you won't be like left in the dark as a user of Nativewind for something like this. We will be releasing a migration guide that highlights not only that these changes exist, but how you would actually examples of how you would actually change this stuff. So it's not just gonna be like a rug pull or whatever.
No, we're actually gonna have I'm planning to do some, because we have these stack blitzes now where we can actually have code that runs in the web browser. We could actually have like a live example that console logs and shows you how this kind of merging works inside the components, which is good as well.
So update on the Paris thing, by the way, will not be speaking at Paris. It's presumably a conference more focused on technical, the in-depth stuff. And so unless we were more focused on, going into the nuances of how, say, version 5 functions, or perhaps even version 4, probably app.js is a little bit more, in the wheelhouse of what we're trying to do. And so, that talk, just to let everyone know, is going to be around what the vision is in general for Nativewind, over the course of the next year at least, and how we think about it.
We've applied for it. We're still waiting to see.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We'll see if it's accepted, but yeah, and then we'll talk about version 5 there as well. So, those are the major things. I am working on to sort of double back slightly to the Stack Blitz thing you were talking about. Because we can't use it for Nativewind UI, I'm actually creating a companion app for the App Store, and that would actually, be approved by Apple or Google or whatever, and you would see it, and you'd sort of like have the two against each other. I saw React Native Paper does this. Maybe somebody else.
And
Kitchen
Reanimated
Sink, I think,
have like their demo app as well. Don't know if that's published to the App Store yet. I
think CallSec has Kitchen Sink. So that'll be there. But one of the things I want to do with the new documentation also is to provide a dedicated place for resources pertaining to Nativewind. That'll include the tools that we're working on. Like I really want to get that animation playground working, and just some of the more popular tools that Tailwind users are accustomed to, ideally even in collaboration with the people who originally created them. So that'll be like a central dump, so to speak. I can't think of a better word, but that'll be where we put those resources, including component libraries.
I guess just for people listening, in the next version, we're changing our stance on Nativewind a little bit. Previously, before, we were just saying that, look, we're an adapter to get Tailwind working in React. If there's things you want to do with it, you have to kind of implement this yourself. So like we used to have like variant support, and then in the current version we say like, look, you have to bring in a variant library to do that. So we're going to kind of keep that for variants, but there's going to be some other things that we're going to support first party a little bit more. So for example, at the moment we support container queries officially because that's an official plugin. We support that, but we also support safe area insets, and that's been quite popular with people. And so we're looking at kind of bringing in these more like smaller plugins for very common things that people have to do on native that aren't really part of Tailwind on the web because they're not as popular on the web. So one of this is kind of involving theming, which is often a common problem that people have. So we want to kind of bring in a better theming solution so people can have multiple themes, not just light mode and dark mode, so that they can have more named themes. And that's just going to be, again, reusing a third-party plugin, but we're going to bring it in as a third first-party, this is how he recommends doing it, and have guides in the docs on that. And for animations, so Tailwind has animations, but the animation support is very, very limited to some like preset animations that they have. And everything else you have to do is via like arbitrary classes and things like that. What we'd like to do is actually bring in another plugin and kind of give it first party support just to improve animation support within Nativewind. So you actually have these better classes to create custom animations. Just because animations on native, they're a little bit more important than the web. There's little like micro animations of just making things jump or flicker, things like that. On the web, people find them distracting, but on native, they're kind of essential to the UX experience. So we just want to improve and make people's lives a little bit easier and document how that kind of works.
I think it's actually interesting. I've had a lot of people in the React Native open source community reach out with an interest of contributing in that way. Folks like Enzo, his stuff is really, really great in the way of animations. And I think Margello would probably also express interest in if we wanted to provide a way to do it to make sure that those animations remain performant and smooth and all that kind of thing. So that's a very high potential way to engage with like the community in a meaningful way, and your stuff will be used by tons of people.
Yeah, and previously we were hesitant to do it because we had a polyfill layer. So the way animations work is they are built and reanimated, but we had to add the compatibility layer for reanimated to understand a CSS animation and what a CSS transition was, because they do operate slightly differently to how reanimated did their transitions and animations. Obviously, in the new version of reanimated, they now have support for CSS style transitions and animations. So we're going to be removing our compatibility layer and just using that directly. Since we don't have that compatibility layer anymore, I'm more happy to work with the community to kind of improve that support, because most of that support would actually be working directly on reanimated to make us things better. It's not really dealing with our janky conversion layer.
I think we'd probably quickly develop people who are in the community who are leaders of thought in the way of animating with Nativewind, right?
Yeah.
And we could probably give them a lot of agency or whatever in terms of which way that goes and what's the shape of Nativewind animations in general.
I think once we have a playground, and I guess I haven't really thought about this before, but I guess we could actually have that playground in the Stack Blitz, in a Stack Blitz.
Yeah.
So people can actually play with the animations live on their device to actually test out what they want to do.
That's actually a lot of the reason that I'm introducing the Nativewind UI app is exactly because a lot of people who reach out are particularly interested in the feel and the performance or the perception of performance of things like this, which is perfectly valid. It's not just enough to see the documentation and even just a video or something. You actually want to kind of feel what that's like, and that bolt based experience should permit that. So
yeah, I guess actually is probably a good tangent to my next topic. Talking about uni styles a little bit.
Shout out to Yajic.
So we've talked about this a little bit before, that Nativewind, the way we perceive the project is maybe a little bit differently to how the community perceives it, where the community often sees it as just one large project that is exclusively for Tailwind, that basically gets Tailwind working in React Native. While internally, and this is going to become a little bit more obvious in V5 as we change up the dependencies a little bit, we actually see it as two projects. There's a compiler which turns Tailwind into CSS classes. There's a second compiler that turns a CSS style sheet into React Native styles. And then there's the third section, which is the runtime, which allows these styles to work. We have always kind of built this way with the idea that you can switch out those parts individually. So years ago, maybe last year, I posted on Twitter some examples using vanilla CSS or Panda CSS instead of Tailwind, and just to kind of prove out this point. But we'd also like to prove out the reverse side as well, that maybe our runtime could be switched out. So you could use Tailwind classes and actually have that for a different styling library, something that isn't Nativewind. We don't call it Nativewind internally. We actually call it React Native CSS, but something else. And at the moment, our primary goal is to kind of focus on uni styles as being an alternative runtime. Just because we like their approach, because they're doing something different in the React Native space. They're bringing in some new concepts. They're not something that we could just mimic in React Native CSS. And they've also got a completely different set of goals. So we are trying to be, I guess, this is the great triangle of things, where at the top you've got usability, then you have features, and then the other one is performance. And it's pick two. And we picked developer experience and features, and performance for us is the third tier. Yeah. While Unistyle's performance is kind of the most performant. They've picked performance as being their number one, and then below that is usability, and then the last one is features. So they don't quite offer the same feature set as we do, but if you wanted a more performance orientated runtime, they're great for that, because they have these zero re-render theme switching and things like that. And so we'd like to work with them now and see, okay, cool, let's try and get Nativewind integrated with them. Let's get a collaboration going, because their feature set will improve over time. It's a really new project. They're just getting traction in Steam now. If we can provide that integration, then maybe we could have a competitive runtime, or maybe if it surpasses the runtime in the future. But the goal is to just kind of work with them now, and that way people can also have a choice. Do I want the feature set, or do I want the runtime that supports all the features that I want? Or if I'm not using these features, can I opt for the more performance orientated one?
Yeah. So all to say, to sort of rehash what you just said, that Nativewind is a collection of a number of different layers, and there's how you visually perceive it, which largely is just Tailwind, but for React Native, right? It's just that we go from Tailwind language to React Native style sheet language, and then the subsequent runtime that actually renders that. And while you don't see a lot of the layers that are involved in that process, they do exist, and ideally they would be modular in nature. So you could swap them with different things as you see fit, if that's something that you're interested in. One of those layers that Unistyles does really well with respect to performance is the runtime. And we want to allow people who are using Nativewind to be able to benefit from that runtime, because unlike Unistyles, we have largely focused on breadth of coverage, right? and feeling familiar to people, especially coming from React, from web, right? Our priority is whatever patterns you're used to with respect to styling from React, like you have that here, save for a few like nuances. And so by working together with Jacek and the Unistyles team, we're going to try to provide a bit more examples of how you can benefit from that, the work they've done, and benefit from that performance. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So this also just means that a lot of people see styling libraries as competing against each other. We'd rather just work with everyone, and kind of just the ecosystem in general. We didn't build this to win. We just kind of build this to help out everyone. And we'll see how this goes. In React Native, if you look at animations, Reanimated won out over the native animation library that exists, just because it took a different approach that people never thought about. So we're also just trying to be like, okay, cool, this new approach, because it is very similar to Reanimated, maybe that wins out in the end. And we just want to make sure that we've already paved the way for the future, that people can already, like, if that looks to be the way people are going, that we've already got that integration kind of set up for people to switch. The other way is, like, this also just helps us understand how Unistyle works better, and maybe some of those features can be brought back into React Native CSS. It's more just we're working with these guys to kind of get a better collaboration and just improve everything overall.
Yeah, it's been having worked with a number of the folks within the different like styling libraries at this point, it's always surprising to me that the immediate thought is we're competing with each other, and it really doesn't take very much time within React Native styling to understand that a lot of these tools almost serve different headspaces,
different use cases.
Different use cases. And I'm regularly talking to, say, Jacek, and we're actually going to have another stream. It's like myself, Mark Rusevi, and Jacek on like the 18th, I want to say. And so we're always talking to each other behind the scenes and trying to figure out how we can all benefit each other. So it's definitely not, in contrast to say something like when you go on Twitter, right, and you see these like users like going at each other's threads, like that's not how we talk or think about it. If we feel you'd be better served by another styling library, we're going to say, hey, go use that. Like this is what you're looking for. This is what you're prioritizing. This is the best solution for that, or one that I recommend. So, yeah. Was there anything else on your agenda that you wanted to cover?
No, that's kind of it. I do only have like 15 to 20 minutes though, as well. Just left on this.
Sure. Well, if there are any questions, you guys feel free to ask them. Otherwise, I'm going to be like, for the next steps in the docs, doing a little bit of reorganization just to make sure that everything matches one-to-one with the 3.417 Tailwind ones, and then actually going through the individualized stuff to make sure that everything is actually up to date with respect to what we cover, don't cover, cleaning up some verbiage, and then I'll probably also go through and clean up a lot of the PRs subsequently, because a lot of them, they're about like changing stuff in the docs, and then I want to get started on the version 5 documentation. I want to kind of get ahead of that as much as possible, and I think that the launch of the new website, the visual and all that, will sort of go hand in hand with the version 5 release then. That's my goal. Hopefully that's possible. I've outlined all of the different conditions that, the new approach will have to cover: deployments, structure of things, like different like tools that we utilize. And it should be good. I'd love to throw in some of those, like if we could have like different stack blitz examples, so that people can like run it on their device or in the browser. That would be awesome. I went back and forth on this idea of I want to let people play with Nativewind. Like that's really like my goal, is that this is a visual tool and you should be able to like change things and see that. And that's where a lot of the understanding comes from. And then I checked the Tailwind website and I realized that they really don't have that. They literally just have the code snippet and just like an interactable component, and they're separate concepts. And so it's like, I don't know of a really good, like, I don't know of a Fuma docs basically for React Native. Maybe there's one out there, I just don't know about it. But I entertained briefly the idea of actually like, okay, you know what? Let's try to run the website via Nativewind, which I'm not against. We could do it, but it's something I wanted to talk to you more, Mark, about. It would allow us to do some stuff that I think would benefit a lot. That introducing the aspect of interactive play, which would be really strong. But it would probably be something like a Next.js plus Nativewind plus Fuma docs type of deal. That's kind of what I had envisioned. I don't know if that would introduce any obvious gotchas, though.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Obviously, this depends on the docs frameworks and how easy it is to integrate React Native into them or React Native Web into them. It should be fine. It's just how much work, because of like the problem with the docs is like the frameworks are so good, and building a doc website from scratch is annoying. These frameworks provide so much. That's good for doc websites. I'd love it to be a React Native website. But obviously, the support for these frameworks is so high. So we'll see how we go. One thing I actually want to include in the docs as well in the future is actually deployment. So now we have EAS hosting as a kind of first-class way to deploy React Native websites. Previously, we kind of shied away from talking about deployment because no one really fully supported React Native Web and deploying a universal app. There's no sort of way to just be like, I want to deploy React Native. You kind of like deploy to EAS or Enter Vercel or stuff like that. It wasn't very a simple process. It was a bit too hard to document. But we should document deploying to EAS hosting, and that it is just a one deploy command to be able to deploy to all the platforms. Because that has been a question of how do I actually deploy to web, is been a common thing, and we've always kind of shied away from getting into the nitty-gritty of how to set up a personal project and deploy.
Is that something that
you now?
Would that be better served linking to say how Expo or EAS does that? Is there like sufficient documentation there?
Because I think we would just basically point. No, I think we basically just point to the Expo docs and say, look, if you do this, this is how you can deploy through there.
I think that makes sense. And if any subsequent options pop up as far as how you can deploy that, that classic like one-click deployment type thing, we could offer like a similar kind of like, here are different ways to actually do this.
Because I actually had like someone reach out recently being like, I'd like to use Nativewind but with Webpack, because my hosting provider automatically deploys Webpack projects but not Metro projects. And I was like, I feel for these people, because so many hosting providers now are just like, cool, select what type of project you are from the drop down and we'll automatically deploy it for you. And none of them have Metro. So
I also would really like to, in the Discord perhaps, create more of a space for people working with different bundlers or just different tooling, like was it Nux, I think, or NX or something? Like I want
NX,
to
the mono repo tool.
Yeah, currently those people have just basically been communicating through the pull requests and or issues, and I don't think it's very conducive to meaningful discussion. So I want to start to open up some channels for those people to, help each other, because you and I are not going to be able to really do that.
Yeah, I was actually hoping that maybe we can find like a community leader to kind of lead these topics, and actually like you give them a page in the docs and say like, hey, this is unofficially, this page is managed by this community leader. Please contact them through here, and actually just have the instructions kind of for these sort of projects here. So we could just have like a community section, and that'd still be on the official website. We would just put a banner that says that like this is managed by this community leader.
Yeah, and
questions,
we could also, as sort of development surface, like when CallStack added support for repack, right? We can say to those community leaders and be like, hey, you have the what is it, like announcement, like we'll amplify your signal like when these things happen, so it'll be an announcement to the entire Nativewind community. So it's not just like isolated to your thing. Like it should be celebrated. Like, people want to help expand Nativewind, and so I'm definitely down to do that, but we have to do it in a way that doesn't fragment our attention away from like our core focuses.
Yeah, exactly. Like Nate got Nativewind working in the one framework, which is his Vite as the bundler. So it is possible to do all this stuff, and we should try and surface that a little bit. And like Nate's like a great example of, you could just put him as the community leader, and he's happy to help people out with his framework.
Yeah, and hopefully that even gets more attention to one and the stuff he's working on. So cool. That's pretty much it. So yeah, unless anyone has any other questions, I guess actually one last thing, and we'll figure this out offline, but our off stream is GlueStack wanted us to be on a podcast with them around the 27th. Okay. So, but we can chat about your availability.
Yes.
For that.
Might have to delay that one. So I am impromptuing moving house very soon.
An additional bedroom.
Yes, perhaps. An additional bedroom, perhaps. Yes.
Yes. For those not aware, Mark's family is expanding rapidly.
Yes. We're expecting our firstborn at the time of app.js, so we will not be at app.js. I will be at home panicking.
But secretly holding it down so that you can like keep your wife.
And watch the stream. I'll be like, yeah, you watch the baby, I'll watch the stream.
Yeah. Well, we'll see about getting like a pre-recorded video or something, and claim that it's live or something.
Yeah, that'll be good.
Yeah.
So I'll be moving around that time. So might have to do a little bit later, just when things settle down for me.
Sure. I'll let them know like a week or so later, maybe, if that's fine. Cool. Cool. Everything is looking good then. I will catch you in the. Oh wait, what is this? Bradley's got another question. Hold on, let's just show it on the screen. Likelihood of Unistyle's native module getting bundled with Expo Go on.
I don't know.
This
depends on Expo. It's up to them to choose which native modules get bundled with Expo Go, and because Unistyles is a native module, unfortunately it doesn't work with Expo Go out of the box. Nativewind works with Expo Go because we're purely JavaScript. We don't touch the native layer in any way, shape, or form, and that was like a design decision that we made early on because we wanted to support Expo Go and the users there. Expo includes native modules basically based upon popularity. Once a module gets popular enough that they deem that it's good for Expo Go, then they add it in. That's why Reanimated is part of Expo Go. A couple of the maps libraries, things like that. They just reach a popularity threshold that someone says, hey, this should be part of Expo Go, and it's kind of added there.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to see Unistyles part of it. but obviously they can't include every native module under the sun. But maybe as the popularity increases, there's a good use case to bring it over. I think Nativewind supporting Unistyles will help boost the popularity of Unistyles a little bit. I think a lot of people use Nativewind for the UX and they don't really care about the full feature set. So if we can provide that same UX to a different styling library, we might actually find that a lot of our users still like migrate over that way. So yeah, we'll have to see how that plays out over time.
For what it's worth, I was going to say Unistyles, or Yajic and I have been streaming to get V3 into Create Expo stacks. So imminently you will be able to initialize a project with a single command that, you know, spits out a Unistyles project. Not the same thing, obviously, but you know, I can see about talking to Yajic if it makes any sense to have a sort of playground application, their own kind of deployed thing to the App Store that you can play around with. That might be an interesting idea for them.
Yeah, just like a forked version of Expo Go that has it added in should be fine.
It'd be cool to have a upvoting thing for different native packages.
That's the Expo feature request website. Basically has all of those topics there.
But I meant like for what would be included in Expo Go.
Yeah, that's just part of Expo feature requests. Like if you just add a feature request, if it gets enough upvotes, it'll be added.
Okay.
Yeah, but Unistyles is fairly new. It's been around basically a year.
Yeah.
So it's still going to take a little bit for its popularity. Its NPM is trending upwards, and I've had a little peek at the survey results of React Native, and it's trending upwards there. So we'll see how it goes in another year or so.
Yeah, I took a look at I got the early version as well, and I was very surprised. A lot of very interesting changes this year. So, you know, we'll see. Cool. All right. Well, good stream, and catch y'all next week.
All right. Catch you then.
All right. See ya.